1. I worked at a greenhouse, and the company had recently been acquired by new owners. Management tried brown-nosing the new owners by adding a bunch of rules to give our greenhouse the highest quality standard in the company, probably to justify keeping their higher pay rate from the old company. Most of the rules were annoying but doable, except the rule that the packaging department couldn't have iPods or phones because of contamination risk. All the other departments were allowed after following disinfecting procedures, but the packing manager wanted to one-up everyone else. The ramifications happened relatively quickly. People got bored, made small talk. Talking slowed production, people ran out of small talk, and eventually got more and more comfortable with dirtier conversation. Side note, this change was also rough on the autistic co-workers who needed music on demand for anxiety. My manager is a Mormon, and was very uncomfortable with hearing complaints about stories of boomer drive-in movie hookups and homosexual sex lives, on top of the issue of slowed-down production due to small talk. So, he creates a zero-tolerance policy for any sexual talk, but he set the bar way too high. Like PG is a right-up high. I get not wanting to hear grandmas talk about getting it on at the drive-in, but outlawing stories of the first date kiss is a bit much. This was specifically targeting the homosexuals because mild same-sex romance made the more conservative co-workers, including my manager, uncomfortable. Normally, not having personal devices or maintaining professionalism are SOP in many businesses, but the standards he set were based on his ego and his beliefs instead of industry standards. He made it personal, so I did too. As luck would have it, we got an anonymous employee survey, multiple choice with an explain section at the end. The new owners wanted to get the employee perspective on management. So I claimed to be mid-Hindi conversion and that the zero-tolerance policy is religious discrimination because Kama Sutra has many sexual passages impossible to discuss in religious conversation without a write-up. Apologies to the Hindus. I only had 15 minutes to act. Googled most sexual religion and speed-read Wikipedia. He had a meeting with HR and the zero-tolerance policy went away for a while. He never suspected me because I was openly atheist and one of his golden employees. I also slanted my handwriting left on the survey so it wouldn't match just in case. He frequently visited the line to talk about religion, trying to suss out whoever outed him. My instinct to create an employee that didn't exist had been correct. If I had spoken for a coworker or myself, somebody would have been fired. Eventually, he gave up and reenacted the zero-tolerance policy when he couldn't handle the dirty conversation shift again. But it backfired again. See, normally these surveys are only once a year, but when a manager gets reported, they occur every 3 months, until the issue is resolved. So I repeat the process, but swapped the Hindi convert for a free-love ideology hippie. I felt bad for putting a religion in the crosshairs the first time, so opted for someone more generic. Literally anyone born before 1980. And I kept the can't discuss my beliefs without a write-up theme. Well, now he's discriminated against 2 ideologies within 6 months, and his second visit with HR was extra spicy. At this point, my brown-nosing manager has to answer for 2 discrimination strikes and reduce production due to small talk on the line. He finally catches on that the best way to keep people from talking to each other is to give them a distraction. There was a brief period where there was a community Bluetooth speaker and playlist. That also backfired for discrimination because it became almost exclusively white Christian contemporary music. I wasn't nearly as involved this time. My co-workers were on their last nerve and didn't hesitate to report, fueled by the rumors of management's discrimination strikes. The supervisor took the blame instead of the manager in this instance, saving the manager from a 3rd strike. FYI, to managers, company and employee curated community playlists need to include everything to avoid discrimination, including satanic black metal and gangster rap. Just grab a generic playlist and blame Spotify if some of the explicit slips in. Boom, deniability. My manager finally relented and allowed people to use personal devices for music and podcasts, as long as they're cleaned and disinfected before entering. Again, same rules as the rest of the departments. People were no longer distracted by idle chatter, the professionalism policy no longer needed to be enforced, and production went back up. Thankfully, no parties were harmed. My manager never lost his job, attended HR-ordered anti-discrimination classes, learned a lesson, and is set to retire soon if he hasn't already. No co-workers were fired during his witch hunts, morale and production returned to normal in under a year while maintaining his coveted high-quality standard. Also, the supervisor was later fired for sexual harassment. Guess he was hoping taking the hit for the manager would save him later. Only true casualty was my manager's ego. 2. This happened years ago when I was in middle school. The school I attended gave every student a locker, but the student had to provide their own locks for them. It's teenagers and they can get very rowdy moving from class to class, so the locks were really important in trying to prevent them from getting in. You know, like what it's supposed to do. The way you got your locker was by order of last names in your homeroom, so a whole row would be dedicated to one class. In the mornings, my friends and I would hang out by my locker because it was in a larger section of students, so we could talk to everyone coming in the morning. Near the end of the year, I started bringing snacks like donuts or candy to share with them, and would put the rest in my locker for later. At the time, I had a really nice higher-end lock for the locker, so it was pretty hard to try and get it off without the original combo, so I thought I wouldn't have anything to worry about. Cut to class after lunch. A group of guys comes in late to class and they all had packets of mayo they were throwing away while laughing like crazy. I could only hear something about a lock before they had dispersed. I get to my locker at the end of the day and it is dripping in mayo. There was more mayo than lock. In an attempt to save it, I put it in a bag to take home and clean. It ended up pretty ruined, and since the end of the year was rolling around, I thought I would be fine not having one for a couple of weeks. Next day, I come in and put my stuff away and my lunch on my shelf in the locker before going about my day. I come back hours later and find the food that I had been eaten, taken, and thrown all over the hall. I'm pissed at this point, because the group of guys that had the mayo happened to have a guy in my homeroom with the name right before mine, and he always got to see what I was putting in there. I went home and found an old cheap lock and brought it in the hopes of stopping that from happening again. Nope, they broke it off and ransacked it again. I tried another, same outcome. I even tried just a shoelace to see if maybe they'd leave it alone. Again, ransacked, and the shoelace was tied on the guy's lock. So now I'm pissed, and the school wouldn't do anything after I reported it, so I had to get creative. I knew they always went for what was the most front and center, and would always go in if they saw I had brought my lunch or snacks. The solution? Ghost pepper hot sauce covered jelly beans. I bought 2 jars of Dr. Pepper flavored jelly beans, and soaked 1 jar in the hot sauce. The next morning, I made a big deal about finding these in a really cool candy store, and went so far as to offer the group of guys some of the normal ones before putting it in the locker where they could see in. I swapped the jar of normal ones with the hot sauce ones and left them to do their thing. I ended up leaving class early to go to the bathroom before lunch, and found half-chewed jelly beans all over the hallway. They never said anything, and never touched my shit ever again. 3. Happened over 15 years ago. I was in my mid-20s and in a roommate situation. I rented a room in a house with a very busy bus stop directly in front. One roommate was nuts, and it didn't seem super bad at first. She was studying to be a psychologist after all. How bad could she really be? She would walk around the house naked with all curtains open, then get furious if someone at the bus stop saw her. One neighbor had 2 dogs that would bark periodically. The roommate would scream like a madwoman every time. Cue end of lease, and stuck with Psycho for another year. Too poor to get my own place. We decided to rent an apartment because the devil you know, after all. Last week in the house, and the neighbor with the dog starts recording me as I walk to my car. I turn to ask why, and she proclaims she's a witch and casting a sweeping spell to rid her of the crazy woman. I confirm we're moving, and she wishes me well. Was otherwise very sweet to me. Next year is hell. I'm banned from the living room and using my own furniture because she can't have her computer in her bedroom due to the electronic pollution. Entertained questionable partners in the living room when she wasn't walking around nearly or completely naked. She would yell and slam doors when I would play video games or listen to any music in my bedroom with my earbuds or headphones. She couldn't stand the keyboard controllers clicking. She would go around the apartment picking up any hair she thought was mine to wrap around my toothbrush. She would leave wads of hair smeared on the shower walls, and worse. Early into the shenanigans, I get tired of her banning me from the living room, so I sold my sofa since I wasn't able to use it. Rage screaming and doors slamming for weeks resulted. I didn't care. I already had been keeping my shelf-stable food, toiletries, and other effects in my room locked at this point, and had terrific noise-canceling headphones by this point. Realizing she drank a lot of milk, a PettyRevenge plan took shape. I stopped drinking dairy milk and switched to soy. Every time she would open a jug of her milk, I'd squirt a little bit of lemon juice into it. Not enough to taste, just enough to sour. 2 weeks in, she started buying smaller and smaller containers. She finally asks me if I had any issues with my milk. Why no. Whatever could be wrong with your milk? She proceeds to rant about how her milk is always sour no matter where she buys it. I managed to keep a straight face and ask her if she remembered our old neighbor she constantly screamed at. And in a conspiratorial whisper, I revealed that the woman was a witch, and she cast a curse. Eyes wide, face of panic, calls made about how to reverse being cursed, including one to the police. It was a terrific 2 final weeks witnessing the fear and panic that a little bit of lemon juice could cause. 4. Back in the mid-90s, I worked in an early website consultancy. Some decisions were made by upper management that were not inherently bad decisions, but when stacked, turned into a clusterfuck. The first decision was not to sell products but services and to bill appropriately. I'm still convinced that they made this decision not because it was a better fit for the business or they could make more money that way, but because they were unable to define and price actual website products. So they stuck with billing clients for hours, but this was workable. Then there was an observation that the worker bees who built the website, remember mid-90s, so no real tools to do this, and HTML markup was by hand. We're not doing a good job of accounting for the hours spent and therefore letting money slip through the company's hot little hands. A better method was needed to track hours. Spreadsheets would have worked just fine, but one upper management person got a bee in his bonnet about using some brand new software to do the job. We were put through hours of training by some bright-eyed customer reps, installed the software, and off we went. The software was crap. It also ran only on Windows, and this was a Mac shop, because web design on Windows at the time was not a thing. We had one Windows NT server, and the software got loaded onto it, along with some other mission-critical stuff that also only ran on Windows. Then the staff got bullied into entering everything into this software. The software turned out to be an even bigger pile of crap than our websites. The backend did not have a mildly sophisticated database with record-level locking. What does this mean? Usually, when you have a system where multiple people are expected to use it at once, you have a mediator that passes out permissions to edit only those bits you need, while allowing other people to edit only those bits they need. This prevents people's changes from overwriting each other, whilst allowing them to all make changes at the same time, without waiting for the last person to finish up. Based on actual observed performance, the software was blatting changes to a single file, so that if more than one person needed to enter data, they were waiting for the other person to finish up and the software to release the lock. This meant a huge performance bottleneck, which was made even worse by some impressively poor designs of the NT file system inherited from VMS, a system originally designed to run on room-sized computers, where only a couple of people in an organization even knew how to use them. On top of it, This server was doing other stuff, so it would metaphorically wander off and, say, print something, while people were waiting for the time management software. What this looked like for the hapless web designers was that instead of entering their hours on projects as they went, they would hit the end of the day and realize they needed to enter their hours, something they'd been too busy to do because they had been overworked all day trying to make websites. Then, as everyone else tried to enter their hours, they ended up staring at spinning beach balls on their screen as time ticked by, waiting for everyone else to finish entering their hours. If you walked around the office at the end of the day, you saw people staring at their monitors with glazed expressions, occasionally moving the mouse fitfully. As an IT person, I was one of the few worker bee-level people who had permissions to create categories for timekeeping. So I created one for entering your hours in that software, so that people could account for their timekeeping for the software to let them record their billable hours. Naturally, time spent entering your hours was not billable. Entries to that category skyrocketed as people noticed it. I have no idea what happened after that, as I left the company. 5. Background. As I started high school, a new principal took over and decided to overhaul how everything worked. My freshman year, they got rid of finals. Sophomore year, they turned classes 100% test-based grades, also letting students retake tests 3 times since grades dropped fast. Junior year, they made all tests graded on a 1 to 5 basis instead of A to F. Where class grades were still A to F, 5 was given for a 95%, or A, 4 was 85%, or B, 3 was 75%, or C, 2 was 65%, or D, and 1 was 55%, or F. You could not go below a 55%, since 1 was the lowest grade, and the only failing one. My AP physics teacher my junior year was one of the people in charge of curriculum changes, and he definitely thought he was doing a good job in helping the students. After all, grades were getting better, especially for athletes. He had helped redesign the entire curriculum, but hadn't changed much about the way he graded his class. He intentionally made his tests on the harder side, and used a flat curve for grading. With letter grades, he marked a 70% as an A, 60% B, 50% C, and so on. He decided to maintain these percentage cutoffs when he transitioned to the 1 to 5 scale. If any of you have taken an advanced science class, you know lab reports are typically a big portion of the class, and likely caused you many hours of work, mostly doing tedious things like formatting equations in Microsoft Word. I hated doing lab reports. Thanks to my teacher's new curriculum, lab reports could not be part of your grade without being part of your test. His solution was to make lab reports equal to 10% of your test grade, but it was graded independently, also on a 1 to 5 basis. The lowest score you could get was a 1, or 55%. I quickly realized that even if I turned in nothing for my lab report, I would be given a 55% instead of a 0, which would still get 5.5% of my test grade when I only needed 70% for an A. Losing 4.5% of my test seemed like a worthy sacrifice. Cue malicious compliance. For the first few reports of the year, I turned in nothing for my report. He would give me a 1 and scold me, but after the second or third time in a row, he realized I was getting A's on his tests anyway, and I was doing it intentionally. He then made the requirement that test scores would be inconclusive until lab reports were turned in, instead of just giving us a 1 and moving on. When the next report came around, I simply turned in a piece of paper with my name and lab report typed on it and turned it in. He begrudgingly gave me the 1 on the report and the A on the test since I turned in my report. When the next report came around, he announced reports must have each section in them. I'm not sure what he was expecting, but I turned in a page with my name and the title of each section, with no words under the section. Once again, he gave me my A. Next time around, he announced each section must have at least a paragraph, 3 to 5 sentences in each section to be considered complete. In my malicious compliance fashion, I gave him 3 short sentences in each paragraph that went something like, "This is my introduction paragraph. It must be at least 3 sentences long. This is 3 sentences." Got my A. The last time he changed the rules, he announced with a smug face while looking in my direction that there was a 5-page requirement, and text had to pertain to the subject at hand. I proceeded to Google a wiki article pertaining to the experiment, copy and pasted 5 pages of text, and cited Wikipedia to not get hit with plagiarism. I got my A, and he either gave up coming up with more rules or realized he wasn't going to win the battle. The fallout? The next year he changed the entire school's curriculum to include a system of obedience scores to punish students for not completing work, even if the work isn't graded. I was also able to bend those rules to fit my agenda. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 292. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you'd like to get the stories a little bit early, then you can click in the description and you'll find a link to my Patreon, where you can support me on a monthly basis for as little or as much as you like. You'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer Teespring store, where there's lots of nifty merchandise that, well, I like it, but I did design most of it, so I might be a little biased in that regard, but don't take my word for it, buy some, sample it for yourself. Right, let's see. Oh yes, you can also, if you don't want to support on a monthly basis, because it's a bit of a commitment, isn't it? It's not for everyone. But you can make donations during streams or videos like this one. And you don't have to do that, but I do appreciate it, and it helps me keep the lights on. Okay, let's see. I think that's all the business for today. So let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what is, and this one is thanks to the cutest person in the world, my fiancé. What is an unconventional flavor of something that people would kind of raise an eyebrow when you tell them about it, but you quite like? For example, one of my favorite things, I have some in the refrigerator right now, may have one in a moment, is cucumber soda. It's cucumber, mint, and lime. Very lovely. When I first bought it, I bought a case, which I wouldn't usually do if it's something I'm not sure of. So I'm not sure if I actually like it or if I just drank so much of it because I didn't want the case to go to waste, that I just developed the taste. Because I finished that, then I bought a second one. And I've been buying it somewhat on the regular ever since. What are some of yours? I look forward to reading your answers in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.